everybody. This is Nick Lawrence, and welcome to part 5 in our series of 8 for ACE, the Alliance for a Clean Environment. We call this our video blog, and I'm with Dr. Lou Cuthbert from ACE with me here today. And today we're going to be talking about a side of meltdowns, nuclear problems that we don't necessarily always think about, but a very important one. Everybody's concerned about money these days, so we're going to be talking about the financial injustice, actually, to the public that's related to a nuclear plant radiation accident or a meltdown. This is a really big topic, and Lou, I don't think a lot of people talk about this part of it. We have a lot to discuss with our audience.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Nick. Most people kind of glaze over at large numbers and move on to something that's maybe a little more salacious or more sensational, but there aren't many of us who don't wince when we realize that somebody's taken the money out of our pocket or out of our wallet or out of our tax returns. The financial injustice to the public has probably never been greater, except perhaps maybe with the meltdown on Wall Street. We're talking about billions and trillions of dollars here.
Okay.
Some people have heard of the Price-Anderson Act. It's been around for a while. It's been amended a couple of times. But basically, the Price-Anderson Act said and has perpetuated the idea that taxpayers are on the hook. If we have a worst-case scenario, if we have a major meltdown, right now the estimates are that a meltdown could cost in the neighborhood of $1 trillion.
Wow.
Guess what the industry has in that particular pie? About $12 billion.
Their responsibility is up to $12 billion?
Yes.
And then beyond the $12 billion to the trillion?
It's us and everybody out there who's watching this blog today, the taxpayer. So the nuclear industry has basically managed to duck and dodge responsibility for the big ticket items here, as well as for virtually every other item, which we'll talk about during this blog. One of the things that's really sad here is that even if there is money available, there won't be a whole lot of it, and it's going to be hard to get, and it's going to be slow to reach the people. Anybody out there who followed what happened with Hurricane Sandy realizes that it was months before people who were literally on the streets, homeless, maybe living out of cars if they weren't flooded, were still waiting for some help from Congress. Could take as long or longer for that to happen with a nuclear kind of a problem.
So the public, in a sense, pays for the construction of a nuclear power plant. Many times, a lot of the public is opposed to it. We don't reap the benefits of the profit from the nuclear power plant, but we're ending up with a responsibility in the event that there's a nuclear meltdown of paying for it. So, isn't there something about being screwed more than one way, in a way?
Yeah, it's called serial victimization.
Is that what it is? Okay. Maybe I didn't put it quite as delicately as you did.
For family viewing, we call it serial victimization. I'm sure there's some folks out there who would be a little bit more colorful than we are.
Exactly. But it just seems ridiculous, Lou, that's what could potentially happen. And how did they get this $12 billion limit anyway?
Well, in a word, lobbying.
Okay.
Basically, you're talking about a huge industry that has billions of dollars at its disposal, and they have lots of friends on Capitol Hill, Nick. They literally have bought what they want, and they've literally written the legislation. One of the things that I think startles people when they think about it is there's nobody really watching the store. Anybody who's watching this blog who actually believes that the government's going to protect us and come to our aid and defense pretty quickly better think again. Very recently, there was what I call a round of regulatory paralysis, or pass the buck. And this is pretty well documented in 2011. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the Environmental Protection Agency got into a spitting contest over who's in charge, who's responsible, who's going to take the lead, who's going to do what, who's going to handle funnel, channel, disperse dollars. And the bottom line is they can't agree. They're like children playing a game of hot potato, Nick.
So, and I was just thinking as you were saying that you're going to tell us that nobody wants the responsibility, even though it's a collective responsibility on keeping an eye on that. But then nobody wants the responsibility of how to take care of it in the event that something happens.
Exactly. If we have a worst case scenario, I'm predicting now, as others have done, this is going to be a worse disaster than Hurricane Sandy in this country. What we're going to see is one of the ugliest versions ever of the famous "Who's on First" routine, and there's a lot at stake, Nick. I mean, if this thing goes south on us at Limerick or at any other nuclear plant in the United States, we're talking about dead zones. We've talked about that in some previous programs. You and Donna and I have talked about what happens with the radiation, the release, the dispersion of it, all the things that happen. Today we're talking in this segment about the dollars. Just think about what happens. You're talking about the need for temporary housing. If you become a nuclear refugee, Nick, you leave literally with the clothes on your back and whatever you can carry and put in your car and drive away with. I mean, you're literally a refugee. So you're talking housing. You're talking compensation for loss. I mean, if people's homes or businesses or both are in a dead zone, all of your personal property is gone. I mean, it's radiated forever. It's a dead zone. You'll never get it back.
That's evidenced by what happened in Fukushima, isn't it? The people had to just leave.
Exactly.
And when they show pictures of these towns, everything is as they've left them in the past. Kind of reminds me of when the Vesuvius exploded and everything was just frozen in time. So these things, that's what would happen with a nuclear disaster. We'd have to leave, and everything that you've owned or everything you've built or anything that you've had would be there, frozen in time. You're not allowed to go back because it's contaminated. Is that right?
Absolutely. Okay. Homes, property, furniture, businesses, equipment, cars, trucks, all gone. And then the question becomes, who's going to compensate for that? And what people don't even stop to think about is, if you can't go back into a dead zone and you own a business or your employer is there, that's over.
It's over.
You're now unemployed, or you're out of business as a business owner. And the question becomes, who's going to make you whole? And the answer is, that's not at all clear. Who's going to do it, in which amounts, and how long that's going to take. This could be one of the ugliest disasters in American history if it happens now.
So one of these things, while they're fighting over who's responsible for it and something happens, I mean, it would be, as you say, it would be truly a monumental catastrophe. We can't even imagine the consequences of something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the potential losses as a result, like that kind of a thing, and we just talked a bit about who's going to compensate us, and obviously there's no answer to that.
That's correct.
There's no real answer to it. Anyway.
Spin the wheel and hope. I think that seems to be the prevailing mentality at the federal level of Congress. Anyway, one of the least popular entities in history in this country. Let's talk just for a little bit about what we've learned from Fukushima.
Okay.
In a previous segment, Donna and you talked about what we learned about the radiation and the dead zones and contaminations. What happened financially? Well, a whole lot of bad things happened financially, Nick, and they continue to happen. There were lots of losses. There were people who were sent out of their homes and sent out of dead zones. TEPCO, the owner of Fukushima, has refused and continues to refuse to take responsibility for a lot of things that have happened. There's a whole plethora of documented problems that flowed from the Fukushima TEPCO Japanese government debacle that are pretty well documented. Something in excess of 13,000 criminal complaints have been filed against TEPCO, the company, just because people were able to identify specific executives and experts who either lied outright or refused to do what they were supposed to do to protect and preserve people's property, their rights, and their lives. A couple of things that were just over the top. There's one example of a golf course that demanded decontamination of the property that was affected by what happened at Fukushima. The owners took TEPCO into court. The TEPCO lawyers claimed the company was not liable because it no longer owned the radiation that landed on the golf course property. I mean, if that doesn't want to make you take the most stringent action you can take against a company official and their lawyers, put them all in jail, I think was what somebody said.
They don't own the you mean they owned it when it was at the plant, but when it left the plant, they didn't own it anymore.
That's right. Poof, gone.
And the people whose land has been affected, property has been affected, you're going to tell me that they now own it, so therefore they're responsible?
Well, I'm not going to tell you that, but TEPCO and their lawyers tried to tell people that in Japan. I mean, when you want to talk about ridiculous, egregious, and offensively stupid, I mean, these guys are world class, according to a whole lot of experts who are out there. You know, there were lots of things that happened there. There are farmers who lost crops.
Right.
There are some farmers who wound up committing suicide. There was a ban on imports of Japanese beef. You just take a quick look at what's available, and it's going to be part of the blog on our website that people can look at. It's just kind of mind-boggling. You know, the one thing that really got me angry, perhaps more so than some other kinds of things, is that the Japanese government lied to the American government, who both then lied to sailors on the USS Reagan, the USS Ronald Reagan. They were told, no problem, you're safe where you are, you know, continue to do what's going on here, and nothing to worry about.
So they were near the power plant?
Well, they were
not too far from it?
They were not too far from it in the Sea of Japan.
Okay.
And they're suing. 8 sailors on that vessel are suing Japan over being lied to and over the negligent treatment of what happened. They're suing for compensatory damages and punitive damages. Those sailors face an uncertain future in terms of their own personal health and medical well-being because they were lied to by TEPCO, Japanese government, and the U.S. government.
You know, it's interesting to me as we talk about these things, when you start looking at other things that have taken place, even like 9/11 when it took place, the people that worked around that site were told that there wasn't any hazardous material there, that things would be fine, they're not going to get kicked, and we praised all the workers for what they did, and then you find out in a little while that they're suffering from some kind of ill effects from the asbestos or all the different chemical materials. It's no different. They keep using the same logic. Government continues to hide the truth from their citizenry, and yet they, on the outside, they mouth that they're protecting us and that they care about us.
Yeah, it's sad.
Cover-up is amazing.
Well,
right?
it's amazing. What's sad is that we keep taking the same bait and swallowing it.
Exactly, just under different conditions, but
exactly.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I want to talk just briefly, Nick, about what the Limerick plant did to the people in the greater Philadelphia region financially. Okay, they stuck it to the residents, both as ratepayers and taxpayers, since day one, or even before day one. You know, they originally said the plant was going to cost $326 million to build. That was a low number. It went up to 4.3 as an estimate in the early 80s, and the final cost turned out to be 6.8 billion. You're talking about a 20-fold overrun on costs. Anybody out there who's either in business or hiring a contractor to do anything who got hit with a 20-fold increase would have somebody in court so fast they wouldn't know what hit them. So right from the very beginning, ratepayers got hit, the taxpayers got hit because of the Price-Anderson Act that I mentioned at the top of this sequence. And I think people should think in terms of past as prologue. You know, this company took advantage of people from day one. Right now, after having customers pay for the construction. I mean, people sitting out there don't even know that part of their bill included every dollar in the construction.
You mentioned in the beginning of the segment.
Now the decommissioning is coming out of people's bills, and every dollar of that's going to come out of people's bills. There'll be a graphic that people can see. You know, it's pretty clear who paid. The ratepayers paid. You know, for this whole thing to this point. And the other piece is what I call the massive tax dodge.
Okay.
You know, PICO and Exelon failed to pay property taxes on 600 acres from 1985 to 2002. Zero.
No taxes.
Zero. They fought it. 1999, they were finally urged by a court to pay some taxes. They actually went on record, Nick, and said, we shouldn't have to pay taxes. The property's worth zero. So in essence, they said, we've destroyed the property, therefore, ergo, we should pay no property taxes, which is just insane. It's absolutely insane.
Then I guess we should use that logic. If there's ever a meltdown and our properties are worth zero, then we should use the same logic. We shouldn't have to pay any taxes. Can you understand how long that would last?
I don't think we'd get too far with that.
You wouldn't get too far.
No.
Lou, we've covered a lot of topics in this particular segment. We do have to go, folks. Please continue to watch the entire series of 8 of these blogs so that you get a true perspective, and you can go back and look at them all over and over by going to the ACE website, acereport.org. Final thought.
Final thought is that we'll have a list up on the screen for people, and it'll also be part of the blog. What can you do about this? If you're as angry as we are, you contact your elected officials and demand that they do something. We want better protection. We want better emergency planning. Some of the things we've talked about throughout this series. We want immediate public notification of a problem, a 50-mile evacuation zone, Nick, a 100-mile ingestion pathway zone, And we need much better education on how to shelter to reduce radiation exposure.
We got to run. Thanks, folks, for watching. Continue to watch this entire series. This is Nick Lawrence. We'll see you right in our next segment.